Hello everyone, this is Debru and welcome to another Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. Today's topic is the Cheat Manager. Now, in Unreal Engine, there's a thing called the Cheat Manager, which allows us to, as developers, add new cheats to our games using the in-game console. This is a relatively common feature in games as it proves very useful for debugging and try out stuff, even when all the necessary systems are not yet finished. Epic saw this specific necessity and added the Cheat Manager. This is automatically added to your game for both debug and development builds, but won't be instantiated if your authoritative game mode does not allow cheats, which can be easily set up. It contains some functions ready for you to hook up to, and for example lets you do some cheats by default, like activating GameMode or allowing your player to fly. Now that we've covered what the Cheat Manager is, let's dive into how it is used. Okay, so first of all, to start creating our very own cheats, we need our very own instance of the Cheat Manager. For that, we're going to create a new blueprint and use the Cheat Manager as the base for it. So, after renaming it to the BP_Cheat Manager, we're going to open it up. Okay, not very much going on for it. You can override both the init and shutdown functions for it if you really need to set up some specific stuff for your Cheat Manager, but we'll be skipping it for now as we don't really need it, so I'm gonna delete this too. What we are going to do is we're gonna create a new function for this one. We're gonna name it to change player speeds, and in here we're gonna set up a quick test function just to print out in the screen a string to display if the Cheat Manager actually succeeded. Okay, so now this is going to be printed into the screen when we run the command, we compile, and it is important to set this function as an exec. This will allow the Cheat Manager to recognize this function as a valid command. Okay, let's get into play mode and try to open the console with the tilde key. Now, if we try to use the function, we're going to notice that there's actually no displayed message on the screen. So for some reason, the code actually did not work. What is happening here? So for starters, we need to understand that this class is related to yet another default class provided by Unreal, which is the PlayerController. The Cheat Manager is assigned to a specific PlayerController, so in order for this to work, we need to create a new PlayerController instance that we're going to override. So we just create a new blueprint instance of the PlayerController here. So when we open up the PlayerController, we can see that there's a field that we can fill in with our intended Cheat Manager class. So let's set it up, hit compile and save. So the next step is to create a game mode specifically for our game. That is because Unreal Engine by default won't know what kind of PlayerController we're going to use. So we're going to create a new blueprint instance of our game mode, including our PlayerController. Let's create that by right-clicking Blueprint Class, selecting our intended game mode. In this case, it's the Demo Project Game Mode. Rename it to GM_base. And now, after we open it up, we can override the intended PlayerController class to our PC_main, which we just set up. So let's hit compile, once again, save. And finally, we need to set up the appropriate game mode. We can do that by overriding the settings in the world settings, which we're gonna do. Or we could actually make it into the project settings and change the default game mode. We go to project settings, maps and modes, and finally the default game mode and select the GM_base. Now finally we just need to go into play mode again, open the console and type out our function name. Nice, so now it is working as intended. Okay, so now that it's working as intended, we're gonna have to modify the method that we were calling in order to really change the player speed. So let's delete this test function here, And now we're gonna add another input. We're gonna need to add a float type input called max speed in order to set by console the intended max speed of the player. Let's compile, save our blueprint, and now we need to modify some stuff on the blueprint of the player itself. So we're gonna go here. I created a function called change max speed, which accepts a float value called max speed and just changes the max speed of the character movement component. And that's pretty much it. So after creating this function, we need to go back into our blueprint for the cheat manager. And we're gonna have to get a reference to a character. We get that by using getPlayerCharacter. And then we need to cast our specific type to the third person character, which is the one that we're using for this tutorial. After that, we just get the out of reference for this third person character and call the change max speed function. Now the only thing left is to connect the max speed input from our function into the change max speed for the player. That's pretty much it. Compile, save, and let's test it out. So we're going to open the console again, type the change player speed, and now we can type the intended speed. If we type 200, we're going to see that the player moves at a relatively slow pace. And if we type a bigger number, so let's say we go with 800, we're going to see that the player really speeds up. So this allows us to pass in parameters to the intended function from the cheat manager that we just created. Now finally, let's say that we want to call some of the functions from the cheat manager, but not exactly from the console. We can definitely do that because we can get a reference to it. So let's go to the level blueprint and let's create two different key bindings. So let's go with a keyboard event for the U key, and let's go with a keyboard event for the Y key. Now, if we remember, we set up the CheatManager class from the PlayerController. So by getting a reference to the PlayerController, we can actually get the CheatManager instance. We only need to cast it to the intended type, which is BP_CheatManager. And after that, we're gonna need to make a little bit of a tidy up here. So the idea will be to press either the U or the Y key in order to change the speed of our player. So for that, we're just gonna get this reference for the cheat manager, and we're gonna set it up for the pressed event for both keys. We're gonna just duplicate these casting in order to save up on space and screen space actually. Let me align these and clean it up just a tiny bit for the graph. Okay, awesome. So now we need to get our reference for the cheat manager and call the function that we needed, which in this case was the change player speed. Finally, we just need to set up the intended value. We're going to set up this one to let's say 250, and the other one for let's say 800. Nice. So we're gonna hit compile. Oh, we have an error here. We forgot to pass in the cheat manager instance. There we go. Hit compile, save, and let's test it out. So if I start moving, right, I press the U key and the player will start to slow down. If we press the Y key, the player will zoom out again. So that's it for the basics on Unreal Engine's Cheat Manager. If you want to get more development content oriented towards Unreal Engine, like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll be seeing you in the next tutorial.